Recording. Thanks for joining us for the Code Review Weekly Workshop. Um, Yannick's got something to show and tell and or a question. So what's going on, Yannick?
Yeah, hey everybody. I've got all of the just mentioned a little bit. What I'm bringing along today is in our last meetings we've been speaking about um merge requests that include GraphQL queries and that they're a little bit tricky to test and review and all these sorts of things. The MR we're looking at here is a community contribution, in my eyes, an astonishingly good one. And on one hand, the changes are pretty much straightforward. We are having an already existing feature, which is using the REST API, and it is now refactored to be using GraphQL queries. No more features added, just a refactoring, pretty straightforward. So that's fantastic. I reviewed this the way I reviewed things, which I'll be telling you more about in a second. Approved it, gave it to another maintainer because without any comments, like I was just like, okay, this is how you do this. This is just perfect. Turns out not quite. So there were other people involved, and I was very happy to have them around, finding no major things, but still a couple of them. So I think this is something worth mentioning or worth bringing to this meeting. We could now approach this in a couple of ways. And whatever you feel comfortable with, we could option one, just start out giving this a review without looking at all the things others have found and see how far we can take it. Or we just basically can kind of expand all the threads and see what is happening there.
So I'm really interested in your thought process of what were you looking at where you concluded this was okay, and then what would be like the lessons learned after. Sounds like you've piqued my interest. Like the story sounded like just every other day, but then darkness crept into
Um,
the land, and I gotta hear the rest of the story.
Very, very happy to do this way. Full disclosure, the things that are mentioned in here, I have not yet fully understood, which is probably a part of the thing that why I didn't mention them. So, but I'm happy to tell everybody what how I approach this. So, as a quick overview, we are looking at the issue analytics request for projects and groups, if I remember. So it is pretty much straightforward if we're speaking in the REST world, making the request, getting the data, displaying it. GraphQL kind of the same, no mutations, nothing crazy, pretty much getting data, showing it. So I kind of deal with that. First thing I did, manual testing, everything's looking fine. All the features are there. As far as I could tell, this has been working. So therefore, that was pretty good. Checking that. That would be my very first go-to. My second go-to would probably be the tests, and that is also kind of probably the trap I fell into. Um, I've been looking at the tests and checking for what changed. Is there anything missing? Um, is there anything significant going in there? And what I definitely first encountered is the test suite really didn't change that much. Other than obviously we've been feeding a get request into it, and now we're mocking all the GraphQL things and these kind of things. But other than that, nothing has really changed. Like in terms of functionality, this still was a full box of all the things that we had before. So I was kind of already happy with that. When I see that no tests are failing, no tests have been removed, because I was not convinced that a GraphQL refactoring requires any more testing than we already be having within our REST implementation. That was my bold statement. So having the test suite covered, I was basically just looking for the actual implementation. If I can see anything that makes me raise an eyebrow, but it was most of the things were kind of this query, or basically implementation code to actually trigger the query, keys that have been renamed, things like that. Nothing to really pay too close of an attention to. So that was kind of my first approach. Anything that makes you raise an eyebrow?
Well, I'm just I gotta hear what happens next. You said you won't believe what happens next, and I gotta hear what
Did
happens.
I? Okay. So, yeah, and that is hence my first comment. Like, I was sold on this thing.
Okay,
Mm,
nice.
great contribution. Kate, great contribution. Very impressed. All good. The fantastic Dave then took over. And here is what I feel like, oh, okay, I need to work on my review skills here because I don't like this.
Mm.
Minor suggestion, well, okay, praise, yeah, I probably should have done this as well. But other than that, a potential testing gap. Let's see what Dave has to say. And this is like disclaimer, this is the part where I don't fully understand what's going on as well. Should we also test for type, project, and check that the query gets past the correct values? I think we can retrieve the variables by doing something like wrapper, and
Yeah.
don't worry
Oh,
about
yeah.
this
Yeah.
too much now, but help me out. What's going on with this potential or realistic or actual test gap?
So, going to this is likely I, the way I'm going to interpret this situation, and this is a lesson learned for whether you're front end or back end. This is something to just keep in mind. So the intent here would have been pure refactor, no new features. We used to do REST, now we're doing GraphQL and this component, pure refactor.
Mhm.
Um, it's a big assumption that we have proper coverage to start with. And so that's likely what Dave is catching on to. And
Okay.
so one way to test, so you can either look at the MR as an absolute, what is the health of our code absolutely, and what's the
Mhm.
health of the code delta because of this MR. And if you just look absolutely, it'd be okay, I'm touching these lines. Let me just start removing lines and do test fail. Like that's my favorite way to test if there's code coverage or not. And I'd likely Dave might have, that's rather than looking through the tests like you kind of described, that's maybe what Dave did was okay, we're doing some sort of like conditions and
Mhm.
variables, which is a little different. So let me just
Mhm.
check if we've actually tested them by removing them and running the tests and seeing if they fail. That's
Mhm.
how I know that I might have, and I've at times stumbled across a reduction in coverage. But then it brings up the big question of, is that like a blocking issue? Because did we have this coverage before?
Is it in scope, kind of?
Right. But I would say, I would argue we're touching it. So whatever we've touched and changed should be well tested because we want to ensure that a refactor is good and working and like as expected and continues to. So I would I think refactoring does imply if there's no test for something, you get to add tests now.
I personally feel, since this is a community contribution, that I'd probably be fine without them. But that is a night-long discussion we can have about this, and there's more than one
Yeah.
opinion. So that's absolutely
Yeah.
fine.
And I think there's different levels of it too. But I'd love to hear Katya or Drew or Andre what you think on this situation of refactoring and identifying pre-existing testing gaps. How would you handle that in a review?
So from my perspective, it basically depends, right? On many factors, one of which is what Yannick mentioned versus community contribution versus the GitLab employee contribution. In general, what I try to follow is the Boy Scout rule. So you should leave the code base or whatever you are touching in a better shape than it used to be. So Definitely, if there is the way to improve things that is not very cumbersome to still do as a part of the same merge request, then we should do it.
I'm breathing heavily. So
I reckon, like, when you say it's a community contribution, this is a contribution from someone from the community, not from GitLab, yeah?
yeah.
Okay. And so they touched on a code that doesn't have a test coverage?
Yes.
It has some level. It's like, sounds like there's just some holes in it.
Right, okay. I reckon, I guess, for GitLab people to, when they touch on the code and there is no test coverage, I guess there is a bit of a conversation. I mean, sorry, I'm very new to GitLab, just a disclaimer.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, so generally speaking, in my opinion, I should say, like, if it's a very crucial path and someone has the time to add the test, then definitely we should definitely encourage people to add tests. But if it's not a very crucial path and the deadline is very short, then generally speaking, I would still say we should add the tests, but I guess then we can kind of let it slide to some degree, and hoping that the person would come back when they have more time to add the tests. But for like a community, a contribution, I would say, I don't know why, but I feel like I would be a little bit stricter. Like, they have all the time. I think we don't pay for that time, so they have all the time in the world. They want to contribute, so they should contribute something good.
That is such a good
and
perspective.
tests.
Love it.
That's so funny. I had not, that's usually not the perspective I have on community contributions. Usually it's like, you've donated your time, thank you so much. Like, I don't want to ask for more, but I love your perspective of like, what else are you doing? I'm just joking. I think that's I think both of you touched on you do have to apply discretion here. So you can't be over prescriptive, because some things are like, hey, things are broken on .com, and this is a very fragile piece of code that we know fixed this, but we can't add a test because that's too complex. We'd really like to fix .com right now. Like, that's a big deal for, yeah, we should probably do that and defer figuring out how we can add regression testing if that comes up. So those trade-off decisions definitely need to happen at times. I will say, when something isn't urgent with MRs, it's worth a cycle of just keeping that standard of quality as high as we can. It's worth one MR cycle. Like, and in this case, I think David catching that, like, that's great. Yeah, that was a really good catch. And I'm glad Natalia jumped in of like, yeah, we don't want to use wrapper VM. So Natalia was able to, like, this looks like awesome asynchronous collaboration. David identified a testing gap. Natalia had a great idea for a better way to check it out. And what David did then is, this is my number one favorite way to help contributors. If we can provide a patch for them, where they could basically review and study it and apply it. Every time I've applied a patch, it's really easy to think like, oh, well, no one's learning anything or whatever. Like, I've heard, some people comment about patches in that way, but I think like well over 99% of the time I provide a patch, the person that applies it, they're now reviewing and looking over it and owning the solution. And that's a great way to communicate changes. It makes it easy for the contributor. So the way David applied a patch was awesome. Yeah.
100% regarding the patches.
Kasia, I see your hand is up.
I just wanted to ask, by patch, do you mean someone from GitLab jumps in and basically adds some code on top of the contributor, and
Yes.
then Merge, is that a patch?
That's a really good question. So it's this comment that David left, which is this big code block, which is actually a diff. So you can actually hover over this code block and copy it onto the clipboard. Sorry, can you go back to the code?
Yep.
And so what the contributor do is actually copy this to the clipboard, and then through the terminal do something like pb paste pipe git apply, and it will apply the patch locally. So the change is still coming from the contributor, but the reviewer and the maintainer is kind of just giving a not large, but like it's not a trivial code suggestion. It's just like, here's a code suggestion. And so yeah, using patches, I highly recommend getting familiar with generating patches and applying patches as we review code. I do it because I could spend an hour trying to word something just right, or I could spend 5 minutes of just this. Here's the code I'm suggesting. What do you think? And now we're just collaborating like on the code, and that's great.
Isn't it actually something that is already integrated in this review flow in GitLab that
The
you can apply
suggestion thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Be a little careful with those. Like, they work fantastic for small changes, like one-liners and stuff. But if things get too complex, it is at least a little painful to use. And you could easily introduce things that there was no intention on introducing. So that is what to keep in mind.
It's the suggestions don't work. Under the hood is not Git patches working. Under the hood, it's a range of lines and then code we're going to replace on top of that range. And so that's they're somewhat limited in that sense. For one-liners like this, easy, and that's great. I actually end up just sending patches all the time because I like patches so much, and I'm a little bitter that we didn't use patches for suggested changes. So,
and you can have easily one patch for changes in multiple files and things like that. So it is, regarding the context, it has a lot of benefits.
Yeah, but you did identify a great feature request. Wow, that was I'm gonna pretend that didn't come from me, so that I could say we got lots of teams suggesting this.
Multiple file patches or suggestions, rather?
Suggestions that actually support the patch syntax would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, actually.
Do agree.
Yeah. Wow, that's 3 people that both think that that's great. I'm gonna create an issue and get all the thumbs up on it. That's how I guess we prioritize things. All right.
I've been on the contributor side of this problem. Like when I'm refactoring something somewhere in Verify and I'll come across a test gap, I almost always send the new test coverage in a separate merge request because the reviews are so much faster.
Yep.
Like, it's really easy to review one test added to a section of code. And it's also way easier to review a refactor when it is a pure refactor. And I can link out to the tests that say, here's why this refactor is bulletproof. These are all of our outcomes, and I'm not touching them. So you know the refactor is good. Both of those reviews are like lightning. They're great. So I highly, I haven't had this with a contributor yet, but if I did, I might even encourage them to do that because I think the diffs and the conversations are super clean that way.
Yeah, that's a really good option to consider too. And for community contributions, I'll create the follow-up MR too of like, okay, there's a big testing thing that I'm about to make a suggestion for. I don't want to ask more of them. I know this will take me maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I'm about to write the code for a patch anyways. I'm just going to write the code in a separate branch and create an MR for it. And that's, I think that is definitely a good option too. I call these fast follow-ups. And if it has to be, if we identify testing gap, ideally we can follow up on it right away. It's not a deferred 46,000 drops in the bucket follow-up. It would be hopefully a faster follow-up. That's a good point.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the input, folks. I feel a little better about this now, and I'm starting to realize that my take on this, and please take it with a grain of salt, because what I'm about to say is heavily opinionated, and I absolutely might be wrong about this. And also, I do think that this is not a binary question, but regarding a community contribution, I kind of feel like I heavily agree with the follow-up issue, and this should be said. And I'm super happy with the way this has been handled in this MR, with basically like really actively helping out the contributor. But I would also say if our code base already has a testing gap, that's kind of our issue. And if they are dealing with what they have and solving it within these boundaries, then to me, that kind of implies as good enough. It still definitely requires a follow-up issue, and it is something we should be taking care of. But regarding a blocking comment, or basically having this enough to be blocking, I'm not so sure about this. And therefore, I also that's why I started to breathe heavily when I hear the Boy Scout rule term. And that is maybe because in my past career, I noticed that this thing was kind of also being misused as a little bit of a feature creep as well. So I'm super happy with getting our code base polished, but let's be very sure about the scope we're currently speaking about. And if we encounter any further problems or additional problems, happy to fix them. Let's keep our MR small and let's open another issue. Let's do all of these things. That's kind of what I would tend to decide for. But as said, there's more than one opinion on this.
Well, I think that it does depend, because like if you are refactoring, tests allow us to make changes with confidence. Depending on the testing gap, sometimes you do have contributors just stumble upon this is actually really fragile. And so for us to actually change this, we need to have a stricter testing harness almost first before we change it, because of all the context and stuff going on. So I do agree. You're putting weight on prioritizing more than just we got to get everything absolutely perfect. But I do think even if we want to keep MR small, we do owe testing is really good at also just asserting the current change. And so if there hasn't been a second maintainer MR cycle, like if this is the first maintainer MR cycle, if someone catches that, like that's great. If this is like the third cycle and someone's introducing new things, yeah, I would agree. That's maybe a little nitpicky. But if this is the first one, it sounds good catch to me. But
gotcha.
I don't know. But it's okay if we don't agree on it. We can still work together sometimes, as long as you pretend to agree.
Okay.
Katya had a great
I'll try my very
question.
best.
Do you want to voice your question, Katya?
I guess it was kind of a follow-up to what you were saying, that most of the time you would just create a follow-up PR with the test coverage. I was just wondering what would be our preference then. Is the preference of GitLab, okay, let the PR merge by the contributor and then we follow up? Like what if we don't have the time, or we don't have the capacity? Then there will be still a hole or vulnerability potentially.
Yeah, you ask a great question. And I would say probably the preference would be we handle it in this MR. But I think what Yannick and others are pointing at is you do have to kind of judge the fatigue level of the MR and the fatigue level of the contributor. And if this MR has been stretched out, things that aren't critical, we don't want to just continue to add fatigue on everyone involved in the MR. We want, people to feel efficient with the way MRs are being handled and things. So we don't want things to hang around for a long time. So I think the preference would be we handle things in the MR that we identify them, unless it's just very, very out of scope. But with community contributions, especially, just reading the contributor and reading where how long this is stretched out, that can play a huge factor in whether we decide to follow up ourselves, create a follow-up issue. And there's lots of competing goals because one, we want to fill the test gap, or we could be inspired to create a follow-up issue that another community contributor can pick up. And we do want to encourage more community contributions. And some community contributors love, like, oh, I don't really know what to do, but now I'm really familiar with this change. I just made this. I'd love to follow up with another one because I like making more changes. And they'll like doing that if MRs aren't so fatiguing. And so there's a lot, when it comes to community contributions, there's a lot of soft things to kind of just read in the room. And I don't think you can be over prescriptive about it. But if you're really not certain, I would highly recommend just reaching out and asking a question like David did of, here's just a question. What do we think? And I love how he labeled it question. He didn't label it. That was really appropriate for what this was, of like, we're just asking a question. If it wasn't going to work out, then it's not going to work out. And because it doesn't seem like it was super critical.
Do agree. Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody for sharing your thoughts on this. This was super insightful. That was basically all I had to say.
Okay. I feel like you clickbaited me because you said like you won't believe what happens next. And I was like picturing what's gonna happen next. And small testing gap was not what I was anticipating.
Okay. Maybe the term task gap is triggering me more than you. I kind of panic a little whenever I hear it. So maybe
really?
that is.
Oh wow. Okay.
Oh, task gaps are the worst.
How long have you coded on the GitLab project? I'm joking, Yannick. I'm doing a slight jab at the GitLab project.
No worries.
Cool. All right. I have a small one to share. Let me get ready to share my screen by closing out some other things. Here we go. Oh man. All right, let's do it. So this is actually the one we started pairing on last week. And so it got merged this week, which is great. This is an MR on the GitLab-ui project. And the main takeaway for here I wanted to highlight was we identified the original set of changes, and it was hard to tell why we were making this change until in a comment below, we saw a link to an issue. And when we linked to the issue, there was pictures of the actual bug that we were trying to change with this that shows up in the GitLab project with the upstream GitLab-ui project. But the original state of it didn't really have, so in the GitLab-ui project, like we have these stories where for our components, where we'll actually visually screenshot the rendering of the component. We'll do visual regression tests at this level, which is great. But the changes weren't actually like testing these things. And so it wasn't clear if like we were actually fixing the bug. So like the changes to our story. And it was really confusing why we were making the changes to the story. And so I left some questions. One of the questions being, here we were doing this. This is a view behavior feature that we don't use a whole lot of, where we can use this .sync modifier. And that was strange for me to see. So I just left a question about it. And then seeing some other things that are just like, these are a little not what I'd expect. So I left some questions. But my biggest question was, where was it? I can't find it. Oh, yes. I wanted to confirm these things. And then I asked the question if we should add a story to actually test that thing. But it kind of ended up changing what all of our stories look like, just asking these questions because I was confused. And I just want to encourage everyone when you're reading through code, and if you're confused on why, like that's a really good signal and it's worth asking a question about. Not just silencing that voice because maybe, oh well, I guess this is here for a reason. Just ask a question about it and it could pay off. And yeah, this wasn't behaving like I thought it was. Um, and yeah, we weren't really introducing tests for what we were fixing. So I was really happy with the next state of it, and it made a lot more sense. So asking questions when you're confused um, can really pay off. That was a bit I wanted to share. Thanks for letting me share that. Well, that's it for show and tell and questions. Now we're entering the code review pairing part of this workshop. Does anyone have any MRs that they'd like to get reviewed in the call that we can? Let me rephrase that. Anyone have any MRs assigned for them to review that they would like to collaborate where we can all pair review on it? I always have MRs. I always do. And I love it when I can get my work done and do this meeting. But I feel greedy and selfish doing that. So I'm gonna pause. Okay, I'm gonna do it. All right. Let me share my screen and let's see what MRs I have assigned to me.
Just got done clearing my queue. So
man. That I always make sure I don't do any reviews until after this meeting. I'm joking. That would be bad. This is a version bump. Oh look, it's the same contributor. This looks like there is a bug in one of our GitLab-ui components that glitches in Safari. That one might be, I'm hoping is somewhat trivial. This is a review on the customer's project, which is technically a private project, so I'm not gonna do that one right now. These two are always in my queue, so that we can ignore these two. That's how my to-do list works. Like to have my email inbox is like, if I get to 1,000, that means that's 0 for me. um oh, this is also customers. So what do you think? We got this version bump one. We have this UI component fix one. And I just reviewed this one, so I actually need to unassign myself from this one. Let me double check. This one was interesting, and there are definitely interesting finds. But I had already reviewed it. I can go over the finds that I found. There's lots of lessons to be gleaned here, or we can do something brand new. Someone speak up. Tell me which one I should do: the version bump one or the UI component fix one.
The UI glitch looks interesting.
It does look interesting.
Anything but the version bump.
Okay, sounds good. Oh wow, it's just one change. Great. Okay. Interesting. What is this? On issue boards in Safari, sometimes the drawer turns all gray and strange. Turns the color of the box shadow that can replicate by hovering over the close button on a... What? Is that for
I'm 100% going to start writing in issues that things turn strange. And that's the problem I'm addressing. I absolutely love that. And you can all look forward to me sending that in my issues and merge requests.
Things turn gray and strange. I love that. Yeah, that is really good. Let me sign in over here and see if we can recreate this issue. I'm just curious because that seems so wild. Props for I'm gonna pause sharing my screen. Props for Simon using Safari. I was about to resume sharing my screen, but that's after typing in after having 1Password all open. That would have been the opposite of what I wanted to do. All right, signing in. Here we go. All right, signing into Safari. All right, hopefully GitLab's not like Netflix and will kick me out for having too many devices signed in. All right, let's see here. I'm here. I don't see the strangeness. But it's doing a drawer. So I wonder if this is about epics and not merge
It says
requests.
issue boards in the description.
Oh, it says issue boards? Yes. Check out issue boards. Thank you for noticing that. I don't see it. I really want to see.
No strangeness.
There's no strangeness. Except this. Oh gosh. Okay, all right. Let's get away from that. Yeah, I'm not seeing the strangeness. Hovering over the close button on a label.
Pop over into the issue and see if there's any other
To this one?
instructions about that. Yeah.
In the Kanban, if I had an issue and then click on other issues instead of updating with the click, add an issue and then click on other issues. Oh, what? That's so wild. If I add an issue and then click on other issues. Oh, let's see what happens there. All right, I am on Safari. I'm gonna create a random issue here.
Am I allowed to leave a general piece of advice that nobody asked for?
Yes.
When somebody ever encounters a bug that is kind of that hard to reproduce on any of those, a video really, really helps a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Problem validation. Experiencing any strangeness? Create the issue, but then I click on another issue. I didn't see anything. All right. Well, yeah.
But then
I didn't
hover over the X, the close button.
I hover over the X of this one. Yeah.
No,
No, the
Or the
labels.
labels.
The
the
labels.
Nope.
No. I wonder if
Well,
this is fixed. I wonder what version of Safari I'm on. What's about Safari? Yeah, I'm in 15.6 and this is 15.5. So that might be
Oh, look, Donald's
situation.
commented he can't reproduce in
When there are
15.
no vertical scroll bars. Oh my gosh. How do you get no vertical scroll bars?
get a bigger screen.
I guess so. Oh no, I'm removing labels. Sorry. All right, let me not do that. I'm gonna slowly step away. All right. Anyways, there's a bug. Some people
just rip 3 labels off an issue and walk away from it, Paul. That's totally fine.
I'll have to review the recording to recover what the labels were. I don't remember what I just clicked on. I'm sorry.
I think we just scrolled past the comments where someone also couldn't reproduce it.
I couldn't reproduce this. Yes, but code looks good to me. Let's see what we're changing. Prevent. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not eager about hacky CSS things for issues I can't.
Can
What
we?
I would like to comment, if I may, is I think it's really good that the comment is provided for some obscure CSS thing.
Yes.
Because it really helps people to understand why something is there, which is not obvious. However, in this particular case, it would probably be great to actually either link an issue in the comment or provide more specific context. Like a version of Safari, for example. But the link, I think, would be best.
Yeah, I agree. Safari bug where box shadow is visible above the drawer when hovering interactive elements. My biggest question is like, would this affect Z and so getting technical with it? Well, does this affect Z index stuff? So like these, I lost it. The drawers need to stay in front of everything. Something like translate Z0 sounds like, I don't think it's going to affect Z index stuff, but it sounds like it could.
I'd be very surprised if it would, because C index kind of is about stacking elements above each other, and translate is more about the X and the Y scale. So you basically just move things around. That was a terrible explanation, but
yeah, so Z index is about just the rendering, ordering, the stacking of stuff, but translate Z is about,
it's another dimension. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah.
But still, I'd argue that, well, we have to deal with what we're having, but translate Z0 is supposed to be doing nothing, so it's basically just a reset. So this is clearly a browser bug, and if nobody can reproduce, then we shouldn't merge this in, because there will be a fix or a hack for a browser bug that is no longer existing or maybe already fixed.
Yeah. Wow, looks like with Preserve 3D, you can use the Z property of translation to respect elements on top of other elements. Like it sounds like that would change this. Wow, Simon can seems, whew, man, so weird. Yeah. I'm gonna ask that question. It's very important that GL drawer stays on top of other things. Is it possible this affects the Z index at all? Looks like link to this. I'm not ashamed to reference Stack Overflow. It looks like could trigger this behavior. See relevant. See my relevant significant other. Stack Overflow is my significant other. I'm joking. Yeah. So I do want to ask a question. Is this reproducible on the latest Safari? Maybe this is a browser bug. What do you think?
I would then maybe clarify what clarify what you mean by the browser bug. So that kind of implies that then we shouldn't even fix it, right?
Okay, maybe this is a maybe this is more of a Safari problem than a GitLab problem. Probably not. I don't know. Maybe.
Since this is Safari and it is, to me, it feels like it might be a little closer to the OS than other browsers. It might be worth also asking for the OS X version they're running.
Sure. Maybe there's more of a problem which could already be fixed than a GitLab problem. Yeah. All right. While I'm here, I am going to throw in Andre's suggestion of wow, Safari is so weird. I'm doing this in Safari. Gosh, it's so weird. All right. Suggestion. Could we add a link to the originating issue? Oh, let me say praise. Thanks so much for leaving the comment. Could we add a link to the originating issue to make this more clear? All right. I think it's good. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that'd be interesting. That'd be interesting. And so here's some things that make me feel a little better. It'd be really lame if all of a sudden like a drawer wasn't, visibly where it needed to be. But our capybara tests do test for the visibility of things it clicks on. So we get not visual regression testing, but we do get like some visibility testing on things like this. And so if under certain circumstances we had a test and it wasn't able to click on the drawer because the drawer is now behind other things, that those tests would actually fail. I would still be really interested in testing this because this is a high traffic feature. What's the worst thing that could happen is all of a sudden this isn't visible anymore. That would be not great. One of the reasons for addressing this is, I guess this is opened by, I don't know if this is I imagine this issue probably is opened by a member of the community. And so we do want to prioritize those. And we do say that we support the browsers, even if they have an internal issue. We want to try to get our experience working nicely. So we can't just excuse it. But I feel good about the question we asked. And if Simon comes back and is like, oh yeah, there's no issues with it, I'm probably going to want to just smoke test it locally or with an integration branch. So that's one thing with these GitLab-ui projects. I would want to test out the GitLab project using the package from this MR to just verify that in integration we're good and there's no issues with drawers. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for reviewing that one. That turned out more interesting than I thought it would be. I think that's all I got. Does anyone have anything they want to sneak in? All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for taking time to share your thoughts, wisdom, expertise, and questions. And I think it's good. It's all generally valuable. You all have a great rest of the day, afternoon, evening. Adios.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ben.
bye.
Have a great day.